Happy Friday, Joel. Good to see you.
Good morning, everybody.
As you can see, we're not in flannel. The summer weight flannel is not in yet. So flannel and spirit, not in body today.
That's right. I couldn't possibly put on flannel. I live in Florida, and it is dangerously hot outside today.
Yeah, same up here in Virginia. I'm trying to avoid it as much as I can. Although it won't stop me from golfing this weekend. I can say that.
That's right.
Well, so Joel, just wanted to chat. We haven't done one of these in a while, but we have two kind of main things to talk about. One is primaries as they've materialized so far, and the second is January 6th hearings and some of the revelations that have come out. But let's start with primaries this week. We talked a little bit about this on our Twitter Spaces with some of the staff this week, but two of the big ones that kind of stuck out this weekend. Well, I'll go through three. Jim Marchant winning Secretary of State primary election in Nevada. Mayra Flores winning a Texas special election. She is now pending swearing in, a member of Congress, not a primary. And then the difference between Tom Rice losing and Nancy Mace winning. So let's start with Jim Marchant. We track these radicals. Marchant's a guy, as you probably recall, ran for Congress previously, sold his own election lies when he lost by over 5 percentage points. And now he's going to be at least nominally in charge. Well, he's running to be at least nominally in charge of elections in Nevada.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I see is there's a number of really hotbed places for this activity. And Nevada is one of them. Arizona is another. Pennsylvania is another. And so I think looking at this realistically, we've got to understand that though this is a nationwide problem and there's no state in the union that doesn't have its election deniers and very problematic extremists, there are a number of states where there is a critical mass, particularly in the Republican Party, that are electing these election deniers and conspiracy theorists. And so, as political operatives, we have to be strategic. Where can we make the best difference? I also am clear-eyed about the fact that there's just some places that we're not going to be able to move the needle because the way that the primary system is set up. The Republican primaries are largely dominated by folks who have been ingesting the big lie for a year, and there is no moving them off of that. And so I think there's that reality underlying the politics of it. And then there's the more practical matter of, what's going to happen in the general election. And so there's going to obviously be now a new level of concern and probably spending to try to stop him from becoming the Secretary of State of Nevada. And I hope that that's successful. The only option in many of these places is going to be to support the Democrat. And so principled Republicans and conservatives like ourselves who are looking at these things saying, what do we do? I have to be very blunt. The only option is to vote for the Democrat, unless you want someone who is detached from reality and may indeed contribute to a conspiracy that could cause us great harm as a nation when it comes to the next presidential election in particular.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the revelations from the January 6th committee, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but the big one that they focused on yesterday was this entire plan of John Eastman's to send alternative slates of electors. And in many ways, Eastman acknowledges that it's complete BS, but in part only because no Secretary of States were sending actual certified alternate elector slates. And so there's this problem. Someone like a Jim Marchant might conceivably send a separate elector slate. Now, every state works differently. I don't know how Nevada works, but, could conceivably, even if it's not really, in any way legally authorized or permissible, send his own elector slate in 2024. And now, at least in this case, the presiding officer will be Kamala Harris, although Mike Pence, I think, to his credit, did not go along with this scheme, and I don't think would have. But it raises a question of what members of Congress will do with an actual, second set of electors. And Marchant's not the only Secretary of State race where someone like this is running, and so it really is alarming because you see Jan 6 fail. And it's almost like, well, it failed. So what do we need to do to make it work next time? Well, we need to control secretaries of state. And that's what's so alarming to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's that play. We need to control the elections, which is certainly very, I mean, very much out in the open. They're saying that. I think it's important to remember too. What I'm seeing though is that there is a group of us who I think rightly talk about the things like the rule of law and what's legal and not legal. From my interactions with many folks who believe in the big lie, who are embracing this direction, whether it's online or quite frankly in person with people whom I know that feel this way, that's not a framework that they're using. They're not thinking about the rule of law. There are people, in fact, the vast majority of the strongest supporters, particularly those who hold the most extreme views, those who are parts of militias, et cetera, they could care less about what the quote unquote law says. They believe this is an existential threat. They see this as revolution. You know, they often refer to 1776. They see this as, well, of course I would do whatever I had to do to ensure that I say, quote unquote, saved my country. And so I just think we have to remember, kind of put ourselves in their shoes. I'm not by any stretch excusing it, nor do I think they're right. I think they're absolutely wrong. But we got to understand that sometimes we talk past each other when we talk about, well, wait a minute, that's not legal. You know, it's becoming more and more clear that what the Trump administration was proposing was not legal. That's not how these people are thinking about it. They're thinking about, well, it was stolen. There's nefarious forces in the dark ether that are trying to, you know, take down our president and enter woke ideology and, you know, the narrative. And so they don't care about the law. They believe that, you know, a Jim Marchant, for example, would say, we're going to do whatever it takes to save our country, to take our country back. And if that means putting up an alternate slate of electors, I don't care what the so-and-so constitutional lawyer says. That's what we're going to do, because we got to push back against the system. So I just think it's important that we remember it. We're talking about two very different worldviews here, which again makes the task so hard.
Yeah. But now I want to springboard out into something else that I've seen a lot of from people on the left, from Democrats, especially online, and even some people I know in person, where there's an exasperation with the January 6th committee. There's an exasperation essentially that Trump isn't in jail right now. And I think it's a similar kind of impulse, right? Where people they want the law to work the way they want it to work. And when you point out, you know, Trump, there's all these reasons why Trump still is a long odds that he will ever face any actual day in court. And even still, he has he has a right to a defense. He has all the constitutional rights that we would convey upon anyone else. But there's a sense of like, to the same point of our democracy is in danger, so we must go to even extrajudicial means to stop it. And it's, you know, we have to get back to a point as a country. We need to find like this new way to get people rallied around the idea of like, the only way we can protect and preserve our democracy and the rule of law is by respecting the process of democracy and all of the rules of law for everyone. So, you know, you do see that on the right, like the idea that this is such an extreme case, even though it's all built on lies. This is such an extreme case that it requires extreme measures. I think you see it on the left too, in many cases as well. And we just need to like get people back to this center point of, even and perhaps especially in extreme cases, we have to stick with the processes that make us a free country, and that is democracy and rule of law.
Yeah, I think there's a short-term practical thing that we can remember, which is that it does matter the weight of this message and how many people we have communicating this message and living by this message. And so what I mean by that is every elected office matters. And so the more people we can elect, they could be the most, far, I don't want to say far right, but most staunch conservative. Think of Liz Cheney, for example, a 98% rating from every, or more from every conservative group. We need those voices out there saying the rule of law matters. I will follow the rule of law. I will follow the facts and the truth. And the more we elect those folks up and down the ballot, then we're pushing back against that narrative. Conversely, these local elections are very, very important because a city councilman becomes a mayor, becomes a state legislator, becomes a senator. And so it's one of the reasons why we've been talking a lot about how do we focus on down ballot races over the long term. We've got to elect people who, irrespective of their actual platform views on key issues, they're at least grounded in the reality of, I respect the institution of our nation and our republic. I will follow the actual truth. I will not peddle in conspiracy theories, even if the outcome is not what I like. And so those are the kind of leaders we've got to develop at the local and state level. I think of examples both on the left and the right who have done so, who have, even in losing, even in not getting the outcomes they want, have stuck to this is reality. And someone like Jeff Duncan, Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, who we've had on our Ram chats, who, against all political pressure, someone who supported Trump, very conservative, Republican, deeply embedded in the party, was then part of the process in Georgia to say, well, was this election fraudulent? And came to the conclusion, having been in the rooms, I can't come to any other conclusion that this was a legitimate election, and was willing to speak out at the risk of his entire career to do so. We need more people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take us in a weird direction for a moment, Joel, because something what you said about building from the lower levels and how the state rep becomes the federal rep, becomes the senator, becomes, who knows. I had this thought the other day. I was talking to a friend about why California politics is such a kind of a dumpster fire oftentimes. And it occurred to me that, at least in part, the reason why Kamala Harris is currently vice president is, and I'm being very hyperbolic about this, but at least part the reason that she's vice president is because she ran for Senate against another Democrat who her closing statement dabbed in their debate. Like just as an insane moment. I rewatched the video last night because I was just reminding myself of it, and you can even see Harris is like, okay, this is nuts. Now, that obviously Kamala Harris has plenty of credentials, background, and history that got her where she is, but there is this kind of line in politics where, we're sharpened by competition, and when that competition becomes non-competitive, it hurts us. And I don't mean to speak necessarily about Kamala Harris, just more in generally, that it helps people elevate and rise, and the people always do start at the lowest level, almost always start at the lowest level. There are a couple of notable exceptions, and work their way up. And so we need to be policing that lowest level the hardest in many ways.
And people want to focus on Trump because it's so, in your face and unavoidable to discuss. But I just want to underscore the point for a third time here, that what you can do, if you're one of the 8 people listening right now, you can actually make a difference by ensuring that the people you support and elect at the local level are reasonable, level-headed, irrespective of their platforms. They're level-headed, they're reasonable, they'll listen to the truth, they won't peddle in conspiracy theories. Those are the kinds of people we need as civic servants. And also, to that same point, we have this unvirtuous cycle that, because politics has become so nasty, fewer and fewer great people are running for office. And so it is really attracting this weird collection of celebrity seekers and conspiracy theorists and people who have nothing better to do, and it's really, really troublesome. So another thing you can do is, if you're one of those people that is level-headed and serious and has a real background and credibility, consider getting in the process, consider running for office, because we need you to be a city councilwoman or a county commissioner or a state legislator who is not one of those types of people, and also who comes from all walks of life. That's one of the things that I have long believed is a weakness in our system, really from the beginning, is it's bent toward a professional political class of lawyers and folks who are interested in the game and thought leadership of politics, as opposed to a true citizen legislature. I think at times state legislatures have been quite healthy when they reflect that, where they have farmers and ranchers and doctors and teachers and activists and bankers and all sorts of different people You can see a number of notable examples, even today, where state legislatures are fairly healthy when they're diverse in that way. But the more we lean toward these kind of crazy activist politico types and lawyers, although right now I'd probably take a few more grounded lawyers than some crazy conspiracy theorists. But you get the point. We need regular people from every walk of life running for office. It's critical. Our local mayor here where I live is a high school civics teacher, and he is a phenomenal mayor, just a great mayor. He is kind of a libertarian guy, but he is in touch with the community in ways that people who are not a teacher in their local high school would not be. And I think it really makes him a great mayor.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. We like you said, it's probably like I haven't looked up the statistics in a while, but probably 90% of Congress has a law degree. And it's a self-selecting class in many ways. That though I will say, a lot of the kind of Trumpist element that has rose on the anti-establishment message, and those things often go hand in hand. So it's there's nothing wrong with having lawyers, but we need, if you want a truly diverse Congress, you need lawyers as a part of that representative body. But also, just because you're an outsider doesn't mean you're a particularly good outsider. So the key, I remember talking to Dr. Sandra Cosgrove from Nevada for one of our RAM chats, and she just said, "Look, go ask these people questions. When they're out there asking for your vote, go there and ask them for something for you. Find out what they stand for." And I think that's really the key. The last thing I'll say on it is a lot of those small local elections too, you don't even have to run under a party.
Right.
I mean, it depends on what the position is, but the kind of the partisanship, now it'll depend by area, but the partisanship factor is a lot lower on those small local elections. And you can knock on doors and talk to people face to face, and that matters way more than the letter next to your name when you run in those local elections. So it's a great place to get involved.
And I think alarmingly, the right has seen that as an opportunity in a number of places, school boards being one of them. Yeah. And I think we just need those of us in kind of the sane rest of us from both center left and center right who are saying we got to do something different. We can't just sit on the sidelines on those local races and just hope for the best. We need to also be engaged in those. And I know this sounds a little strange coming from a group whose focus has been primarily federal offices, but just because that's been our focus does not mean that we don't understand the critical nature of down ballot races. And in fact, we are looking at, in the medium to long term, how do we get more involved in that? And we will be.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, we've got to build that kind of network of everyday Americans being involved in their communities. That's really where all of this starts. So just a huge aspect of it. So I want to do a little bit of a shoehorn transition here to January 6th. I do think it's relevant because we talked about people being afraid to get in or self-selecting out of politics because of either the vitriol or sometimes literal death threats. And we saw a bunch of formerly very good Republicans leave Congress post January 6th or even pre-January 6th because there was no place for them anymore. People who got death threats and their families threatened and walked away as a result. But so we were having the January 6th hearings. We're reliving the violence of that day, but also the plot that was behind it. Yesterday, the committee focused almost exclusively on John Eastman. And basically utterly debunked his legal theory and showed, I thought the most fascinating quote out of the entire thing was Greg Jacob, who was a lawyer for VP Pence, testifying under oath that he had said to Eastman, what you're laying out here, you didn't think that Al Gore had the right to do this in 2000, and you would never want Kamala Harris to be able to do this in 2024. And John Eastman just looks at him and apparently says, "You're right. Al Gore had no basis to do it. Kamala Harris should not be allowed to do it, but I think you should do it." I mean, just the utter brazenness of a legal theory, of a coup plan, then you can't call it anything else. that you acknowledge would be a disaster for the country. But again, to what you were saying earlier, this is a moment that matters more than any principle or law or democracy itself. So you should do it. It's just stunning.
Yeah, it's really alarming, but also a reminder to us that our government is made up of human beings who make decisions, and that I think that's been one of the most striking things for me from the hearings is just the really interpersonal wrangling that was going on. This was not some a highfalutin bureaucratic conversation, including academics, and this was like bare knuckles interpersonal warfare / cajoling, and it really came down to the principles and character of the individuals involved, and what they were willing to do and what they weren't willing to do. I do think again there's a context of worldview here that cannot be discounted. Some people had been so steeped in some of these conspiracy theories that I believe they began to embrace them and really believe they were true. And that's where they become so dangerous, is when people believe they're actually true. It doesn't matter what you say, they'll then take the action that goes along with that. But then there's the figures who I think are most dangerous, which are the Eastmans of the world, who very clearly understood what was going on, but was willing to choose the dangerous, destructive, disruptive path to get what he wanted. And those are the kinds of people that I think make history in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, it's alarming. I think, the two other things that stuck out to me is, one, after January 6th, John Eastman emails Rudy Giuliani and says, basically, on second thought, maybe I should be on that pardon list. He knows what he did. Thankfully, we didn't have to go through the constitutional crisis of preemptive pardons by Donald Trump for a coup that he incited. But still, obviously signed that he wanted it. But then the second one is the more brazen one, is that he emails Greg Jacobs again after the coup, while Pence is speaking to ratify the election, and he says, "Hey, now that the whole counting process has been delayed and we've violated the act, so basically now that we've succeeded in breaking the law with our violent coup, maybe you just violate it a little bit more." I mean, just absolutely stunning brazenness to come back and say, like, we already broke the law, let's break it some more. And eternally grateful for VP Pence in that instance, and for the staff that he surrounded himself. It's very telling, right, that the VP staff was filled with people with a little bit more character than the presidential side staff. So people surround themselves with who they want, but that's like the last point I want to bring up, is what scares me the most is that the next Republican presidential administration, we're going to see some of these figures again. Like a Jason Miller now has the White House credentials in the Republican Party. He could be in a future Republican White House. John Eastman could be a lawyer in a future Republican White House. But guys like Greg Jacob, who stood up and said no and who have testified to it, probably won't be. And that's scary. The people who were around Nixon when Watergate happened wound up in administrations like the Trump administration. And I think the same thing's going to happen with a lot of these Trump figures.
Well, I think it's the day of reckoning for the Republican Party and its power players. People like to say that over and over and over. Oh, they'll never make it through this one. Oh, now they have to deal with this. Oh, I've had a number of conversations in the last few days with key Republican figures who are still trying to stay in and make things happen for the good. There are going to be decisions made in the next 6 to 12 months as people think about the next presidential election, as people think about how the party is organized, and particularly around who is allowed to have influence within the party structures. They'll never control the outside groups, the Turning Point USAs and CPACs and all that. They're going to do what they're going to do. But to your point, people are going to have to decide, how will I structure my leadership going forward? And if it's a Trump-like figure, someone who has taken their lessons from Trump, unfortunately, I think I now have to put DeSantis fully in that camp. I had hopes that maybe he would avoid that, but in someone like DeSantis, you have someone who is way smarter than Trump and is learning all the lessons from Trump. And it will be someone like DeSantis, whoever ends up being the nominee, if it's not Trump. Will have, that's when the day of reckoning, I really believe, will come. Who do they put around them?
Yeah.
And if they choose to put those kind of folks around them, then I think we're in for a really dark period.
Yeah, I agree 100%, both on DeSantis and on the implications of who winds up in their kind of team. But it's hard to imagine if you want to run in the Trump lane, which DeSantis very obviously does. He wants to own it. He wants to take it from Trump. But if you want to run in that lane, you got to hire the people who helped build that lane. And we'll see when he puts his presidential. At this point, it's more of a when, not if. He's running for president in 2024. I can't imagine him not. But when he starts assembling that team, we'll see who it is. And I'll just say, judging by the caliber of his current press secretary, that I don't have high hopes that he'll surround himself with a real team of rivals or a real scholarly Republican conservative non-Trump oriented team. So a lot to see. I think the big takeaway is just like, this is broken, man. This is broken, and we've got to fix it. And it starts, to circle it back around, starts with everyday Americans, not legal scholars, not conservative opinionators or liberal opinionators. It comes with people who are sick and tired of it, who are just saying, we're going to do something different, we're going to do something better. So let's do it. I know you got to run.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here. Keep up the good fight. Let us know how we can help you. Reach out anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. And have a great Friday and a great weekend and a great Father's Day for all the fathers out there.